Hey y'all, welcome to the Q Spot Podcast with host Quavila Jones. Be prepared to laugh, cry, and take notes as we dive into each discussion. Stay tuned. With special guest Kara Maxwell discussing her breast cancer journey. Hey y'all, welcome to a special edition of the Q Spot Podcast with my special guest, very dear friend of mine, Miss Kara Weathers Maxwell. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am great. I am so grateful that you decided to share your story, even though I hate it's this kind of story, but it is what it is. And so, I really wanted to get this message out. As we know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And yes, there are many other issues and health issues and social issues that need awareness, but this one is one that affects Black women at a different rate, or especially women of color. I'm going to say women of color because, I'm sorry, Kara is mixed race. And so, sometimes that also has a factor in how you are, is a factor in how you are affected, depending on your ethnicity. And so we want to, and then Kara's in another category. She's what? How old are you, Kara?
I'm 35, but I was diagnosed when I was 31, a month after I turned 31.
And see, we usually hear about getting your breast exam, get serious about testing over 40, but now you can't say that anymore. Every woman, any age, needs to get tested.
Yes.
And even men. So
Self-breast exam. Self-check.
Yes. All right. So we're going to go into, Kara's story, but I just want to give a little background to that as far as this disease affects women at different ages, different ethnicities. However, we have seen research that shows Black women and women of color of ethnicities are affected at a higher and different rate. It's more aggressive. And so that's why, like Kara said, self-care, self-exam is very important. And then talk to your doctor. And we'll definitely get into that. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about Kara and your story. So you are approaching your 5-year mark of being a survivor, but it has been a journey, to say the least, to get here. So let's start with the beginning, with the diagnosis. So let's start there.
Okay, well, in December, I went to my doctor and he did the exam, and I had my regular gynecologist visit, have pap smear, everything, and everything was done and everything was clear. Well, January came and I had like a sore spot, and it was like right about here.
Okay.
And it was really sore. And then like 2 weeks later, it turned red.
Oh.
And then like I noticed like I started to get like a hard spot. And then I told my husband about it, and he was like, "Babe, you might need to get checked." And
Okay.
it took me a while to get an appointment in for my doctor. And by the time I got into my doctor, it was sore and red, and it was a knot. And when I got into my doctor, and he was like, "Yes, you need a mammogram." And he got me in within a mammogram within a week. And by the time I got done with my mammogram and the biopsy and then into treatment, it had grown 7 centimeters in 22 days. That's how aggressive it was.
Wow.
And so they classified me as a Black woman because of me being biracial and how fast it was growing.
Oh my goodness. So anyone with any diagnosis, feel some kind of way. So tell us, what was your initial reaction?
I screamed. Like, I was sitting in a chair and I was like, I can't have breast cancer. And they told me that I had breast cancer. And I'm like, I'm too young to have breast cancer. That's for older people. I've never heard of anybody my age having breast cancer. And then the woman tells me, yes, you do have breast cancer. I was like, no, I can't. And she goes, my kids started gathering around me, and they looked at me and they were like, Mom, you have breast cancer? And I was like, no, I can't have breast cancer. And then I was like, the woman on the phone says, ma'am, yes, you do. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to you later. And I immediately called my best friend, and she goes, oh my gosh, Kara, you do have it. Yeah, if the nurse told you, you have it. She's in the medical field. And she's like, you need to call your husband. And I called Jamar, and he comes home from work, and he's like, does the kids know? I'm like, they were sitting around me whenever I was talking on the phone. Of course they know. And so they found out when I found out, and they were already young. They were um, 3, 7, and 10 at the
Wow.
time. 13. So yeah, 3, 7, and 13 at the time.
Okay.
And
Before then, had the kids ever heard anything about breast cancer? Well, I mean, the 3-year-old probably was like, what? But,
no, they just knew that cancer meant death. And that's what I knew.
oh,
That's all I knew about it. And so they were crying, and I was crying at the same time. And so I had to do some research on my own to comfort them. And thank goodness they gave me a book with lots of information. And so my 13-year-old would read that book to my younger kids, which are both girls,
yeah.
and he would read that information to them, and it comforted them, and they became closer.
Wow. Okay. So you got the diagnosis. The kids they're confused. They're upset. You're upset. You're like, what's happening? What was your husband's reaction when you and him finally got a chance to sit down? And I know Jamar, he's pretty even keel. He's cool, calm, collected most of the times. What was his reaction though?
He was like, "We're gonna get through this. It'll be okay." And he was very positive, and
Okay.
he didn't cry or anything like that. Every time I was sad or anything like that, he always had something positive to say. He
Oh,
like even when my hair started falling out, and I like after the first chemo, it was like 12 days after the first chemo, and I filled up a Walmart bag full of hair, and he was just sitting there, and he watched me, and I was just crying. And he was like, babe, it's just hair. And then he tells me, you know what? I can call somebody. We can shave it off. He goes, you have always wanted to do this. Now you have the opportunity to start new. And he was right.
I can't even imagine what it's like having a supporter like that. Because unfortunately, that's not everybody's story. They don't have someone who just immediately jumps in. It's like, okay, look, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna do this. Like some spouses have their own breakdown moment because they don't either know how they can help. They don't know what to do for you. Every spouse responds different. And I'm just really happy to hear that, Jamar just stepped up and stepped in and said, okay, look, we're going to do this. And
Unfortunately, over 90% of women who were married and diagnosis become divorced before the end of their treatment.
no, is it
Yeah.
simply because their spouse just doesn't know how to deal with it?
It's a lot of reasons because they
Oh,
can't deal with it. They don't have the strength. They don't want to do it. They don't see their wife as a female anymore once they lose their breasts because of some people have reconstruction. I didn't. I'm flat.
okay.
I chose no reconstruction.
All right. So let's get into treatments because I know you, we've talked a lot. You've been through a lot. Like you've
Yeah.
been through a lot. And since getting breast cancer, it's like it just opened Pandora's box to a series of other health conditions as well. And so your story it may not be unique, but it's different than other women. So let's go into what was the first chemo. Okay, what was the first treatment? And then what was the first chemo like? Walk us through those steps.
The first treatment was like 3 days after I've got my porter cast in
Okay.
my shoulder. Well, it was close to my shoulder.
Okay.
And that was to save my veins
Okay.
because the chemo will tear them up. And I have very few veins that's accessible.
Okay.
So Oh, so whenever they came in to the chemo room to do this, I was nervous. I was scared because the needles are big.
Oh wow.
They are fat and they are big, and you are intimidated by looking at them. They tell you just don't look. And
How could
it's
you not?
actually it doesn't hurt as bad as what you would think.
Okay.
And so I didn't look, and I had to sit through 8 hours of chemo
Yeah.
every 3 weeks for 8 rounds of chemo treatments.
So you're sitting in one spot, literally. Like, is there a break to go to the bathroom, get something to eat? Like,
Yeah, if you had to get up, you had to take your chemo pole with you.
okay.
But there was a chemo medicine that I had that made me really anxious. So I would get up and I have to walk the floors and walk around because it made me anxious and I couldn't sit still. And then there was one that made me really sick, and I would have to keep a garbage can next to me. There was one that made me really sleepy, and I would just fall asleep really fast with it.
Oh,
There was one that would make me really hungry, and they had snacks up there, and I would have to eat a snack.
oh, wow. Okay, so there were a variety of things you experienced
Yeah,
going through chemo. And so
yes.
was there ever time you had to go through it by yourself? I know
I
your health
did go I did go to my treatments by myself. I chose to do them by myself, but whenever I went in the day after to have my Neulasta shot, that was to keep my white blood cell counts up so that I wouldn't get sick as easy. I would take like one of my kids so that they could see what was going on and they wouldn't be scared, and like I would bring them to the smaller room because back
okay.
then they were at the Clopton clinic and they had a small room, and they allowed like children to come in, and so that they wouldn't be scared or anything like that, as long as they weren't sick. And they would move us to like away from anybody else that was sitting close to us, so
Okay.
that we weren't right next to anybody.
And so what even through this process, one, how long did your chemo treatments last? Like, was it weeks or months?
um every 3 weeks for 8 rounds.
Ooh, okay, I bet that was a lot. It
Yeah.
felt like
It
a
was like
like,
from March to September.
wow. Okay. And so was Jam when you got home, was Jamar there, pretty much waiting for you to comfort, to care for you, like just you getting
Usually
the
he was, because he would get off work in time to come and pick me up. He always dropped me off and he would always pick me up. And then like his cousin actually took really good care of me. She was amazing. She
that's
would
all.
make sure that the kids were taken care of, and that there was a hot meal for Jamar when he got home from work, and that if I was sick, then she would make sure that I had soup or something light to eat. And Jamara could spend time with me and the kids. She made sure that, and it was like she just made things easier.
Okay. And so during this process, I can imagine that there was still, a lot of emotions that you were feeling. So walk us through what were some things that you were feeling, okay, yes, you're getting treatment. And yes, we know that there's been a lot of advancements in medical technology and treatments, and cancer is not a death sentence all the time. But
Mhm.
just tell us what you were feeling though. Like, what were some, because I want people to get the real, I mean, unless they've been through this, I've never, so I could never understand, but try to help us understand what you were
Well,
feeling.
there was only one oncologist here in Jonesboro that was willing to take my case on. And because it was so unique in my age, and I had such a high risk of not making it. So no, none of the other oncologists at either hospital was willing to take it on. It was only one oncologist, and he was amazing. He ended up having to move, and I ended up with another one, and I ended up having to fire him, and I've got
What?
a new one.
Why did
But
you call your doctor?
well, it's a difficult decision, but I ended up having a stroke because of him.
No, ma'am. Okay, you have, please, how did that happen?
Because I was on an aftercare medicine, because even though if you're done with chemo and radiation, you still have aftercare medications and aftercare treatment. Especially if you are estrogen positive,
Okay.
if your cancer is estrogen positive, you have to take like medicine to make it negative,
Okay.
basically.
And because of that medication, you had a stroke.
Well, I had to take a blood thinner because I had already had a blood clot. And well, he took me off of my blood thinner, and the medicine had a high chance of causing blood clots. And he took me off of the blood thinner, and the medicine caused me to have a stroke because I was on the medicine without the blood thinner.
Okay, so you're already dealing with breast cancer, the treatments, how your body's feeling, the changes your body's going through, and then to have a stroke on top of that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't even know. Like, again, what was going through your mind? What were some of the feelings you had?
I was angry. I was very angry, and I knew what happened. I drove my kids from a church picnic home all the way to the doctor, and I met my husband at the doctor. And then my husband drove me to the hospital, and I lost feeling and strength in my right side, my left side.
Oh
So
my
I
goodness.
don't have all the strength and feeling in my left side, and I already have neuropathy from chemo.
Okay. You- when okay, the word survivor warrior applies here because again, I've had the privilege of having a little more inside look into some of the things that you've been dealing with. And another condition that's brought up that both of us deal with is lymphedema. Um,
Yeah.
Most
Oh,
women that have had breast cancer and breast cancer treatments or any kind of surgery to remove the lymph nodes or breast, anything up here, you are
yeah.
at higher risk for developing lymphedema.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have it in your arm. And so,
Yes, I had positive lymph nodes I had breast cancer and positive lymph nodes. So they had to remove 13 lymph nodes
how many?
underneath my 13 out
Out of
from
one
underneath my
side?
arm. Yeah.
Okay. And so now, okay, you're dealing with the treatments, the aftermath of the breast cancer. Now you have lymphedema, and then now you're having to get extra, I won't say products, but lymphedema compression
Mm,
gear, and
yes.
you have
And
gone through.
insurance does not pay for that.
And see, that's another thing we have been trying to advocate for, but that's going to be another discussion down the road. We're going to definitely
Oh, I was
lymphedema.
so angry about that when I found out. I called you crying, I remember.
Yes. And it's really sad that, you know, people have to deal with all these different conditions and insurance just will not cover it. I mean, and sadly also the people that are, I don't want to say the most affected because somebody gonna come for me. But it seems that the people who are affected at a higher rate are those who just don't have an endless bank account, who don't have.
Products are so expensive.
Yes. So we need some advocates. I'm talking to whoever out there. We need some advocates to advocate for, insurance to cover products and services that, you know, the budget just would not cover, and let's talk about when you were going through all your breast cancer treatments, which I want to say this, it's never really over just because you've had surgery. And I want to talk about that. Just because you've
I
had
had
surgery.
radiation as well.
So radiation, chemo, surgery,
I
but
had
it's
two
never
surgeries
two
because
surgeries.
I had a lumpectomy at first, and
Okay.
then I had to go in for a mammogram, and they kept finding suspicious tumors in my left breast. So my doctor and my surgeon, my oncologist and my surgeon decided that it was best if I had a double mastectomy, which removes a double mastectomy is it removes both of your breasts completely, all breast tissue.
All right. So let's pause and talk about that because again, you're married and most men are like, oh, my wife, they're used to their wives looking and being a certain way. And so what was that conversation like with your husband when you told him?
He said that he'd rather me be here than to just have boobs. He says boobs come and
"Oh,
go.
that's so amazing. Everyone should be so blessed to have someone like him. It's so understanding.
He was like, I'd rather have you here. He's like, he's like, it is not worth it. I was so happy.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, he's always been just really supportive of me. And any decision that I wanted to make or that I decided or that I was thinking, he's always been really supportive.
Now, what about the kid? Did you tell the
I
kids at
talk yeah, I always talk to the kids about everything. I did not hide anything from them.
over the course of these going on 5 years, how would you say it has not affected, maybe the wrong word, impacted your family?
It's changed my family. I've changed. Um, and everything about me's changed. How I
Okay.
see things just changed. How like the small things matter. Um, the like I pick my battles. Sometimes it's not worth it. Like if my daughter wants to wear her tutu that she wore yesterday to school on top of
Yeah, girl.
leggings, go ahead, honey, wear it. I pick and choose my battles. It doesn't matter. Like the small things don't matter anymore. And if they stay up, if my girls are laughing and giggling, and it's past their bedtime, and then I know they have school tomorrow, they're happy, and it makes me so happy. Now I let them stay up.
That's awesome. And you have some wonderful, respectful, intelligent, just bright, just wonderful. I know I said wonderful already, but wonderful young ladies. And then your son, just to give people a little sneak peek, a little insight, I met you when you were a teenager.
Yes.
And you have a son. And so I've gotten to watch all of them just grow up and blossom and just be amazing children. And they have adjusted so well. Most kids will just act out. And not to say they maybe not have had their moments, their
Oh
children,
yeah.
but your children seem to have really adjusted well. And they are mommy's biggest supporters and cheerleaders.
Oh yeah. Especially my girls. My son is a mama's boy. He comes in, he lays down on my bed, and he sleeps with me, and he he's a mama's boy.
Wow. Were there ever moments, going through your treatment where you just really didn't want to be touched? Like you didn't want anybody in the bed with you? Like you
Yeah,
just
felt uncomfortable with myself. I
okay.
had to learn to love me as me again.
Okay. Wow. So I want to, wrap up by talking about getting tested, testing
Yeah.
yourself, and then, what message do you want to send to younger ladies? We see a lot of people younger and younger getting body augmentations. And you know what? Live your extra best life. If you want to get your boobs done, fine. However,
There is a risk of breast cancer now, a certain breast cancer um breast with breast augmentation, with
wow.
breast implants.
See, so definitely have those conversations with your doctors and get to know your body first before you start doing all this extra stuff
Yes.
to your body. But talk about send a message to younger ladies about why they should constantly check themselves. When I was younger, I was in my 20s. I wasn't thinking about, doing the whole, you know,
You ain't even got to do that. You can lay in bed and check. Everybody's got to know their body. You should
okay,
know your body better than anybody.
okay,
Just you rub them, feel them, touch them. If anything feels out of sorts, please get a check. Yeah, I mean, because even when younger women have denser breasts,
okay,
you will know what's out of the norm than anybody will.
okay. Now, what about going to the doctor? Were there ever moments where you felt they weren't listening to you? Like you just didn't know
Um,
what you were talking about.
I had problems with the insurance companies
Okay.
telling me that I was too young, telling me that it's impossible for someone my age to need that type of help or need that type of test or need that type of surgery or that type of a type of care. Like I'm in palliative care now, and because of all the issues that I have. So they fought me on that because I was in pain specialist, but they moved me over to palliative care and they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to pay for that at first. So my doctor he wrote a note in and got me into that. But it's a battle. You have to be your own advocate. You have to know yourself. You have to be strong for you.
Okay, ladies, you hear that? And men, we're gonna talk to men too because
Yes, men, because I've interviewed men who have had breast cancer, and it's a lot of men that know yourself. Even if you bump something and you notice that it's really tender, hey, get that checked out. You never know what it is.
and again, there's all types of websites and there's all types of pictures because not every breast cancer story is the same. Not
No,
every, how can I say, physical feature is the same.
no.
Your breasts take on different shapes and sizes, and you might have bumps and pus and like
Yeah, sometimes if the nipple is like goes concave, where it goes inward,
really.
you yes, get that checked out. Or if you are having like milk producing milk and you're lactating and you don't have a baby, that get that checked out.
Okay, I know I'm over 40. If I start lactating, we're gonna call Jesus and see what oh God, I'm not trying to make light of this, but definitely sorry. If you notice any changes, ladies and gentlemen, please, please, please go to the doctor, and especially Black people and people of other ethnicities that's non-European or non-white.
Yes,
I should
there's
say.
more Black people dying or African American people dying of breast cancer than any other culture.
Um, we hear stories about how it's more aggressive. We don't know why it's more
Because more people of color aren't getting checked out.
okay. And by
They're
the
not
time
going to the doctor.
they get a diagnosis, they're already at probably stage 2, 3, or beyond.
No, usually stage 3 or 4. That's whenever
What?
It's in advanced stages.
Wow. Okay. So get tested. We cannot stress that enough. Mammograms, ultrasounds, whatever it takes. Um, I
If
remember
you don't want to feel them, you have a boyfriend or a husband, let them feel them.
you got a best friend. I mean, I know I have a best friend that she like, girl, okay, let me do this for you, and it's,
Yeah.
you have to let somebody in. Okay, so talk about that aspect of letting people in, because I'm sure when you were going through treatments, you
I
weren't able to be the mother you wanted to be.
No, I had to do the hardest thing that I've ever done. And my best friend, her and my husband got together. And it's still hard for me to talk about,
Mhm.
but I had to let my kids go with her for 4 weeks because I knew that it was best for them
Oh wow.
during the summertime while I went through the hardest part of my treatments to go to Florida. And I'd never been away from my kids that long, and it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do.
And
And but I knew what was best for them. They created so many memories and they had so much fun. They would have been sitting at home watching me be sick and not having the memories or having those fun times. So I knew that it was good for them.
wow, that's amazing. And so again, people, get tested, get a handle on this, and thank you for sharing that. I can't even imagine. Anyone who knows you knows the kind of mother you are. You are very protective of your babies, as you should be, as we all
Yeah.
should be. And to have to relinquish, them to somebody else, and I can't even imagine, what
Yeah.
that felt like. So thank God you have that friend that was there for you. And thank God you have an understanding spouse who's like,
Yeah.
okay, we can get through this. Wow. All right. So as we wrap up, any final words? Any
Protect
inspirational?
yourself. Know your body. It's okay to touch your breasts. It's okay to feel them. It's okay. You know your body. And it's okay if you're scared. It's okay to be scared.
All right. Thank you so much, Kara. I appreciate you so very
Thank
much.
you. I love you.
I love you too. So, ladies, gentlemen, thank you for watching this special edition of the Q Spot podcast. There will be more interviews to come. This first interview was very fitting because Kara is in a different age range. And so she's not your typical over 40 woman. And so I really hope that you took away something from this interview and you start checking your boobies before you start Instagramming your boobies. So just
Yes.
stay. All right, so stay tuned. There'll be more interviews to come. And don't forget to check out all the other interviews on the Cube Spot podcast, YouTube channel, and Anchor FM. As always, pink sugar kisses. Mwah. Thank you for watching the Q Spot Podcast Video Edition. Don't forget to join the Q crew so you don't miss a beat. Follow, like, share, and subscribe to all of my social media platforms and the major podcast platforms. And as always, pink sugar kisses. Mwah.